using the word prayer more than meditation in your writing. You start transitioning to using the word prayer. And people tend to have a different understanding of these two words. For some, meditation means a form of thinking, or even worse, something not Christian. Do you care to elaborate?
Yes, at this time of my life, I was living in Russia, at least half of my life, a bit more than half. And in Russia, they don't use the word meditation much, at least within the church. They like to use the word prayer. And for them, prayer includes the use of the Jesus prayer, which really is the Orthodox meditation, though some people might say it isn't. But anyway, as far as I'm, in my understanding, the use of the Jesus prayer is exactly the same as what I was taught when I first went to a school of meditation many years ago, except that the name Jesus is used as the repetitive mantra. It says actually more than Jesus. It's a sort of formulation of a number of words, short prayer. But that is known as the Jesus prayer, and it is, the effect is, now I won't talk specifically about the effect because it will vary with everybody. In fact, I'm a bit nervous of this whole subject of prayer and meditation, talking about it on internet, because everyone is different and will have different experience when they use whatever method they are using. So I don't, I have to be very careful when I'm talking generally. Let's say that both practices are essentially means of turning the individual towards God. I've often demonstrated on these videos from turning from the small, separate individual towards the infinite. It's a process of moving in that direction. Perhaps that's as much as I'll say about it. And then this happens intellectually, emotionally. It can happen almost any way that the human being is capable. It can work in this way. It doesn't need any particular practice at all. It happened quite spontaneously when you're going out for a walk, for example, and you suddenly find yourself uplifted. In fact, as often as not, these things happen without any preliminary effort from the individual. Often life's best experiences just come completely out of the blue, unexpected, unpremeditated, to say the least. But some of us are moved to take up a regular practice of, call it what you will, which usually starts at least with words, and then the words may get less as we become more familiar with it. It may not seem necessary to use so many words. Just like with close friendship, when you get to know someone well, you don't need to go through the whole business of introduction, do you, each time? Often you can just be quiet together. So it is as we draw nearer to God. So depending who I'm with and what's in my mind, I use the words prayer and meditation fairly interchangeably. But I like the word prayer. It's sort of old-fashioned, and I like old-fashioned things. Jesus used the word prayer. Meditation is, I suppose, got a rather sort of new age connotations, and depends on the company. I don't mind Other people say John meditates or John prays according to their understanding. I don't much mind. I can hardly tell where one ends and the other begins. But I suppose in common understanding, prayer is normally consists of words. Very often it starts off with a please God, help, or do with a sort of list of what do they call it, petitions to God. Whereas meditation, it starts with words. Sooner or later it's become silent, a silent waiting upon God, really. A silent immersion in rather than pleading with. But these things are very variable and one often leads into the other. So I think I've said enough about it.
You do talk about the realm of duality versus
Yes,
non-duality, and how it might connect to prayer and meditation. But
yes. Well, if this isn't clear to anybody, again, this is one of these words that's come to me late in life. It's become. It took me a long time to understand what people were talking about. Then it gradually began to sink in that the duality is when you think in terms of you and me, this and that, God and me. Well, this is one might say ordinary life. Well, it is. The world consists of duality, me and the others. You think this, I think that. Different people, different sexes, different races, different species, different everything. Whereas as we draw nearer to spirit, we get glimpses of what may seem completely crazy from this world, but glimpses of what's really out of this world. It's a higher consciousness where there is just one. It's just one. I tell you, it's a bit like when you climb up a mountain or go up in an airplane. You look down, you see the whole world beneath you. It's not divided. When you're down there on the ground level, it's very much divided. When you're looking at it from way up in the sky, it's just one, isn't it? That's how it is. As we get lifted up into spirit, one gets more and more of this higher consciousness, in which you see the world undivided. First of all, less and less divided, and then we may eventually get some views of it undivided, and eventually one goes out of this world altogether into a higher consciousness, where it's like waking up from a dream. The world is no longer there. It's just you must wake up out of it, and then of course your understanding and your view of the world starts to change. And you get a few glimpses like that. What is the world? What is this state of separation that causes us so many difficulties in life? Then we're getting somewhere when these sort of glimpses begin to penetrate. Why can't we stay there all the time? Well, maybe one day we will, but to begin with, it's just a few momentary glimpses. Sometimes a bit longer. Duality and unity, when the world is seen divided or united. We get glimpses of it in many ways. Quite a good example is sports fans. Football matches. You can get a great sense of unity, can't you? Whereas the whole thousands of people are all, roaring your heads off for your favourite team and almost living as one, and you forget about being an individual. You merge into a greater mass of humanity. as long as you're happy with them, then it can be marvelous. It can be very uplifting. Some people find that in churches where you get a good congregation, you're all singing hymns, and you lose yourself in this general togetherness, oneness, one communion. And best relationships are like that. You can feel so close to another person that you almost forget you're two, at least at times. A close embrace, you melt into one another, don't you? You can feel it with a dog, feel it with many things. You can merge into nature, feel that you just sort of become one with the trees and the grass. Look up at the stars, you can have that sense of melting. Well, all these are early experiences of unity, which may then expand and expand. See, first of all, like with this football crowd, you identify with your own team, don't you? You probably can't imagine including the other team as well, your opponents. But of course, go up and get a bit higher point of view, and you'll find that you're one with your opponents. And then perhaps with all people who love football all over the world, a sense of that you're all sort of one great something bigger than the individual. Patriotism, nationalism, these are great examples of people losing themselves in something bigger than the individual.
You write about in spirit all is one and is seen to be one, and there are really no separate people associated with it, but the mind's eye sees a world of different people, which I think we can all connect to on an intellectual level, but to really experience it.
Well, I wrote this 35, I can't say exactly, between 30 and 40 years ago. These were some of my first experiences of it. And it certainly doesn't mean to say that, you're there, because the experience has been becoming more established ever since. Again, as I've often said, I don't really know if and when, well, at least for me, within my experience, it's an ever-evolving process. It just comes into my mind one of the lovely old hymns I knew as a child. Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, there I would always be, nearer, my God, to thee. I suppose I learnt that hymn when I was 8 or 9 years old. Something in my little heart loved it, responded to it then. I think it was my lifelong longing to be loved, I suppose. This sort of, sink forever into the arms of love. Yes, it hasn't changed much in nearly 80 years. Same sort of fundamental feeling that I think's always probably been the greatest motivation in my life, leading me ever deeper into prayer. Nearer, my God, to thee. You put that on my gravestone. Nearer, my God, to thee.
John, on page 162, do you want to read that second paragraph for us? I thought it's beautiful. It starts with all problems in life arise because we forget the fact that we are spirit.
Yes, well, easy enough to write that first time you get a glimpse of it. It's true, absolutely true. Just before we started this interview, I looked back to remind myself what this chapter in the book was all about, and I read that. I thought, well, gosh, that's it, isn't it? I'm no wiser now than I was 40 years ago. But of course, what I wrote then, well, I said before, it becomes ever more established. It's well, I wouldn't say it's quite continuous now, but more or less continuous. I have that understanding of life.
Do you want to read that little bit for us?
All problems in life arise because we forget the fact that we are spirit. In spirit, we are neither cold nor wet, and certainly not separated. Spirit solves everything. Spirit needs nothing, is whole, complete, perfect, as is also the world which it sees. Body and mind are its servants, instruments for its use in the world. Unlimited by time and distance, it unites everyone and everything in itself. This inward or spiritual union is the real, indissoluble marriage to everyone, especially to those able to respond. Well, amen to that. Perhaps I may repeat here. Some people read this book, read any of my books, and say it's a collection of John's thoughts, but it isn't. And I do my best to explain how these insights arise. It's very definitely not a thinking process. But when we meditate, by, I think, almost any means, or when you pray, you, to some extent, we let go of our own concerns and surrender them to higher authority. You turn towards something bigger than ourselves. Either you identify it by the name God or you just do it like that. As I'm just opening my hands, we let go. And so this thinking process, which is rather like a layer of consciousness, I often describe it like the clouds in the sky. And when you go up in an aeroplane, you pass through the clouds into the clear sky beyond. Now that's exactly what happens when we are drawn in meditation. You let go. The process of getting in an aeroplane means you let go of your hold on earth, isn't it? You're giving yourself to the aeroplane, and the aeroplane will lift you out of your day-to-day attachments to the earth and lift you up. And the first thing you go through a layer of cloud. When you're in the earth, often you look up and you can see nothing but clouds. You always forget the sun shining. But when you're in an airplane, you go through the clouds, and there you see the sun shining up beyond. Now, this is a very good way of describing what happens. Now, or what can happen. Now, insights that I describe in this book are just that. I could never, if I could sit here and think for the rest of my life below the clouds and not come up with that. Because it wasn't, how could I know? I don't know any better. I just see the clouds. But when I'm taken up beyond the clouds, good heavens, I can write this. And that's where it comes from. It comes from that higher level of consciousness to which I've been taken up. I can't go there by my own motivation, apart from sitting in the aeroplane, which is the equivalent of using a prayer or mantra. I get taken up, and there you can see, just like when you go up the top of a mountain, you can see what's the whole world laid out in front of you. And that's what I'm able to describe. And this is why I call a book like this Windows of Realization. The windows open, and you see, good heavens, you see from a higher level of consciousness. It's not a thinking process at all. It's beyond thinking.
You write about it, you write, knowledge, for example, is revealed, not
Yes,
learned.
absolutely, yes. Yes, I remember being taught many, many years ago in the school where I learnt to meditate that true knowledge is not taught, it is revealed. It comes to you. That can happen in quite ordinary ways in ordinary life, you know. The other day, I bought a brush for scrubbing my back in the shower. And, of course, my hand was soapy and slipped on the handle of the brush. I couldn't really get a grip of it, and I couldn't quite get the arm into the right position to position the brush where it could get the bit which was what I wanted to scratch. Anyway, last time I had a shower, I was rather pleased. I thought, I got the knack now. It's been revealed. I've discovered how to do it. And that, in a sense, was a revelation, wasn't it? Suddenly, your arms find the right movement, and the brush gets in the right position. Have a nice scratch. I've got a nice clean back now. Well, the same way, these revelations of higher knowledge come in much the same way, really.
Another thing that really stood out to me is we create and become possessed by our own worlds, but none of these worlds are really real.
This is what happens when you get a glimpse from a higher consciousness. You see how, of course, one's ordinary life is not lived like that, and you see how possessed you come by your, well, as we've been talking about duality, how possessed we become by a dual view of life. In other words, me and everybody else, you and me, and of course my possessions, which I'm concerned to safeguard and look after, and by this and by that. It's really everything in life that is qualified by me, mine, our. And just to become theological, you see, this is really the problem, that man has fallen in consciousness from this high point of unity into this lower consciousness of duality, hence all the problems of separation. And this, in my understanding, is described allegorically by Adam's fall from paradise. Originally, man was singular, one man, Adam, undivided man, singular, made in the image of God in paradise. And then he fell in consciousness into this world of separation, duality. And so man's problems started and have been multiplying ever since. That's why it's so important, and especially at any time of history, but particularly in these days, that at least some individuals try to find the way back to unity, find the way back to one. bring the world together again. It's not so much by our doing, it's by surrendering to the higher authority, surrendering to God, you see, which we, or finding a way back to the presence of God from which we've been absent, finding our way back home. Yes, indeed. Oh, man's problems. Why is he doing? How can I wrote what I read out then, and then come back into a world of where we get ill, where we get COVID, where we get all sorts of troubles, and of course we die. Why do we die? Why? Because we're separated. We're separated from the source of life, which is God. In the real world, in spirit, you see, there's no death. There's no darkness. So this world is described as under the powers of darkness or ignorance, because we've forgotten where we come from, forgotten where true home is. And thank God, probably most of the people who are watching this video, you're watching because you're interested in finding a way back home again. Oh dears, I can't. I often wonder how I can best serve this world that I love and the people in it. And the answer to that question is the work of prayer, the work of allowing my own consciousness to be raised, and thereby hopefully giving a lift to whatever's around me. There was an old saying my mother used to say to me as a little boy, smile and the world smiles with you. Cry and you cry alone. Well, I'm not a very smiley man, but perhaps more than I used to be. But certainly this work of raising consciousness and trying to describe it in my books and in these videos, hopefully those which have ears to hear, some of them might be encouraged even to have a similar understanding, carry on the good work, raising consciousness.
John, what would be a good starting point or practice of awareness for all of us to start to get glimpses of our dualistic behavior?
Very easy and straightforward. The first thing we've got to do is to be present. Now, we very seldom realize how we are not present. But let me give you the age-old advice: keep your feet on the ground. Now then, if you can actually feel, here now, feel your feet on the ground. Put them there, my dears. Lift your foot up and put it down so you can actually engage with the floor. Let your toes just feel the floor, or even if they're inside your shoes, just make sure you can just realize that your feet are standing on something that is still, that is firm and still. So that in contrast to your own active mind and your wobbly body, you are anchored on something that is steady and still underneath your feet. Now that's the first step to finding peace, because the floor is still, or the ground is still, isn't it? So what's all this difficulty about finding peace? All you've got to do is just connect with the earth. And you're at peace immediately, aren't you? Perfect peace. Unmoving, steady peace. Always there. Underneath your feet. And then if you just listen, listening is a marvelous way of bringing you into the present. Even if it's just the hum of the computer, or the sound of a car or something. If you're lucky, you may find something more natural to listen to. Just listen. Extraordinary, it just brings you into the present, doesn't it? And if you really listen, you'll find you're not thinking. Your mind becomes completely still. You just listen. Feet on the ground, listen. And then because your eyes are there to see, just try looking. Look what's in front of your nose. And you'll find if you really look with full attention, you're as steady as a rock in the middle of this crazy world. Totally present. Now, what a contrast to how we normally live. When you think you're alive, but actually you're lost. Lost in thought. It's most of the way how we live most of the time. Lost in our silly heads. There you are, my dears. Nothing complicated. Just common sense, isn't it? Just common sense. Feet on the ground. Listen and look. That's far enough. Do that. You don't need anything else. Countless times in the Bible, God says, I am with you. The last words that Jesus said, I am with you always. So where are we? We are not present. God is present. We are not. So if you want to find God, come back into the present. And even without realizing it, when you find this stillness through feet on the ground, listen and look. Be still, says God, and know that I am God. And it all becomes very simple and within range of your awareness, within range of your understanding. Look, just in this video, we've stopped talking. Feel the silence, being present. It's more truly communicative than words, isn't it? The most meaningful of all languages. The meaningful of me, just being silent. Silent and present. Present in the presence of God. When we're really present like this, you'll find what happens to your problems? They simply disappear. Don't they? Peace be with you all. May you be at peace.